All right, so welcome everyone to our August Alumnae Chapel Talk. I'm Allie Jacobs. I'm the president of the Alumnae Society. Happy to host you. I'm going to turn the floor over to Lindsay Mays, one of our board members in charge of Chapel Talk programming.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Tonight we should have a really great talk. Kiki Fehling, class of 2007, is going to be talking to us about, as you can see on the slide, ways to cope with the pandemic and more. She's a psychologist living in New York City, and she specializes in trauma and suicide and emotion and LGBTQ mental health. So, she's just a great resource to kind of give us some tips and advice just on, stress and all of that sort of stuff and help us get through these crazy times. So, and she was on my hall as her prefect. We were the best hall, third floor Wendell, in 2004, 2005. So, Kiki, the floor is yours.
Awesome. I know there are some people who aren't used to using Zoom here, so I also will say wherever you see like the little box in the upper right-hand corner, you can also pick the box that's just one square. If you just want to see my face rather than everybody's, then you can make it bigger and smaller, so that option is there for you. So yes, hello. Okay, I'm gonna jump in. So what I hope to cover tonight is I'm going to very briefly just tell who I am, how I became a psychologist, like kind of like what I did at Hill as well. Talk about what DBT is, which is the type of therapy that I specialize in primarily. And then spend most of the time talking about various coping skills for negative emotions. So I'll go into those in the most detail for most of the talk. And then I hope to leave time for questions. I realize I should keep my phone out so I keep track of time. At any point, feel free to interrupt, turn your mic on, ask a question. If you know how to use the hand raise feature, I should be able to see that. So feel free to do that right in the chat. I think I'll get kind of like a pop-up. This stuff can be tough to understand for sure. So I want to make this as interactive as is necessary to make sure that you get something from this. All right, so who I am. Lindsay already kind of gave some of the stuff I was going to say about myself. So what I will add is I currently live in New York City, where I've lived for almost 4 years after graduating from my PhD program at Rutgers. In the bottom left is my dissertation defense with some of my biggest mentors at Rutgers. My dissertation was on self-injury and LGBTQ adults, and a lot of my clinical and research interests overlap a lot, and I'll talk about those in a second. In the middle there, that's my brother and I figured he should get a shout out. He's probably embarrassed right now because he is also a Hill alum. So that's where I am in a nutshell. That's useful. Who I was at Hill was the same person, obviously, but I was on the girls' varsity soccer. I was vice president to Brandon Jacobs' president on SGA. I was involved in theater and I was in humanities. I was a prefect at times. I kind of had my hand in a bunch of different things. I loved Hill. I boarded all 4 years. It definitely was really instrumental in my life journey in general, especially theater, I would say. So that bottom left photo, when I think about why I got into psychology, theater is always there. So I think theater was the first place where I really kind of dove into becoming a character and trying to understand human nature, ask difficult questions, understand humanity and its suffering. And I think I was interested in that for a number of reasons, but it was one of the main things that led me to eventually take psychology courses in college, which then in turn led me to the field, obviously. I think that clinical psychology also became attractive to me because I have struggled with mental health issues myself throughout my life, dealing with depression, also self-injury. I had lots of friends who had mental health difficulties, both before Hill, at Hill. It was something that I saw firsthand, both personally and in other people's lives, like how much mental health like touches a lot of people, and mental health difficulties touch a lot of people. Specifically, in my freshman year at Hill, I found out that one of my friends from my middle school, Phil Carden, whose photo is in the upper right, he died by suicide at the age of 14. And that was an incredibly formative experience of having my life touched so early with suicide and feeling very confused by that, that I do think that was very informative to where I ended up in terms of my research interests and my clinical interests. Finally, I think the other thing I'd mentioned for what led me to psychology and then where I got to was in college. I got very involved with LGBTQ advocacy, as you see in the lower right. And in that advocacy and activism that I did, I learned a lot about health disparities that the LGBT community faced and got into addressing that disparity, specifically in self-harm. So that is how I found it. I think all of these things kind of accumulated and then led me to, when I was at Rutgers, really resonating with a therapy called DBT. So DBT stands for dialectical behavior therapy. The dialectical at the bottom, that word there. It's a therapy that was created for people who have borderline personality disorder and who therefore might engage in self-harm and experience very intense negative emotions. And as such, it was a therapy that really resonated and kind of hit at all of the different things that had originally brought me to the field of helping those people who kind of need help the most, but get it the least. There's a stigma attached to BPD in the field that has led to just a lot of people with BPD not getting the help they want. So DBT was attractive to me because it kind of captured all of my interests, as I said, but also was a way for me to really make a difference and to reduce suffering and help people in a way that really was what drove me at the end of it to the field in general. I also really like DBT because it's emotion focused, because it's behavior focused. It balances both change and acceptance and gives lots of options for that, hence the dialectic. The dialectical refers to a philosophy of dialectics, which means that two seemingly contradictory things can be true at the same time. And while, of course, that has been useful in a mental health context, it's been a thing that's been incredibly useful personally in the kind of polarized world we currently live in, politics and culture and otherwise. Like finding the truth in two opposing sides and trying to find a synthesis is an incredibly valuable skill set to have, and I really appreciate DBT for that. Besides that, I write here that it's collaborative. It's a very collaborative therapy of a therapist and a client really being just humans in a room, trying to understand one another and trying to build lives worth living is something that we say in DBT a lot. So another reason I like DBT is because it has tons of coping skills. So specifically, this isn't even all of them, but as a part of DBT, at least like adherent, comprehensive DBT, we teach a bunch of skills in a class: mindfulness skills, emotion regulation skills, interpersonal effectiveness skills, stress tolerance skills, and walking the middle path, which is kind of like that dialectics and balanced thinking stuff. So I have found these skills to be incredibly useful. Honestly, I think they should be taught in schools as a part of a regimen of like giving kids the knowledge to understand their emotions can be incredibly powerful. And I have absolutely used these skills myself in stressful situations. So it was very hard to choose which ones to focus on. So in this talk today, I'm going to talk about one skill very explicitly. It's the TIP skill. It's under stress tolerance. It'll be the last thing we get to. Besides that, I'm going to kind of pick and choose and not use DBT language, but get through a couple other emotion regulation things that I think could be helpful to think about for people. I also know that I talk very fast. So if at any point people can't follow, I also want you to like raise your hand and let me know that, and I will do my best to slow down. Okay, so before we start, I do want to give an initial disclaimer that emotions are tough. Therapy can be helpful. I think everyone should be in therapy, and this is not therapy. And the only reason I say that is because I'm going to do my best to give examples that I thought could be relevant to people, but it's likely I'm going to miss something, or it's possible that it'll be a little bit different than your experience, that it'll be confusing. I'm going to do my best, as I said. And at the end of the day, the real power of therapy is being able to sit down and have someone know you personally and get down to the nitty-gritty about what your emotions are idiosyncratically and what you should be doing to cope with them most effectively. So if you really like this talk, or if you think it sounds interesting, but it kind of causes confusion, I encourage you to reach out to therapy, a therapist in your area. And if you don't know how to do that, you can definitely ask me that at the end, or shoot me an email another time. I'd be willing to help you with that. Besides that, I want to say that it makes sense if you're struggling right now, and it also makes sense if actually you've been feeling pretty good. There is no normal. I've talked to a lot of people who are both feeling a lot of negative things, but also experiencing some positives about this, like work from home or something like that. So, and it's okay if this good and bad emotions changes for you on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, now that it is kind of been months. So just want to put that out there. Emotions are complicated. There is no right way. Hopefully, if none of this is valuable to you now, you can remember it at a time in the future when it is. All right. Place to start, in my opinion, is going to be with answering the question of what are emotions in the first place and why do we have them? So this is a difficult question to answer succinctly, I think, but basically what it comes down to is it's this process, this profile of experiences of biological, physiological, and psychological and cognitive responses to something that happens in the world or in our lives that we feel, kind of mind, body, and soul, if you will. In DBT, we think about emotions from an evolutionary aspect. And what I mean by that is that emotions are biologically based. When we feel something, we feel it somewhere in our body, almost always. There is research to show that not only are emotions biologically based, but they seem to be like intertwined into the human DNA. Babies from really young ages, before they're even like really able to fully socially mimic, all show the same types of emotional expressions. So this is a thing that seems to be cross-cultural. It's not necessarily something that's learned. It seems to be inherent. Although, of course, we do some learning depending on our culture, how we are told as a man or a woman or a person living in the US versus China or something like that, of how it's appropriate to express emotions. But from like clean slate, there are these basic emotions that all human beings experience. That is because they give us information. So emotions tell us something. They basically act as like red flags or green flags, just kind of flags, like pay attention, something's happening. Sometimes that thing is like bad. It's like, okay, you got to get away from that. You got to change it. You're in danger. But sometimes it's good. It's like, yes, that's great. Give me more of that. This body sensation is our body's way of telling us that there's something we need to listen to right now, something that's wrong or something that's good that we just need to learn from. And in response to that, then they push us to action. So this is why they're evolutionarily beneficial, that we have these responses that then aid us in our survival and give us benefits that we get to learn from and move forward. So to get kind of specific, something happens and you feel something, like a bear, it like comes up on your hike and you feel fear, right? So this is a very automatic response. Most people will feel this. Most people will feel it exactly the same way. Intense heart rate, get sweaty, just kind of like pale out, like have lots of physical sensations. In addition, so something happens and you feel something, and usually that means that you do something in response to it. So bear leads to fear, leads to running away, like wanting to get away. That body sensation of heart rate and sweat and like paling out leads you to like just physically want to like crawl out of your body and run away. So there, the emotion is telling you something, and it's also making you do something that's good for your survival. Avoid the bear. The thing is, our brains are very good at picking up on all sorts of things that may or may not be super dangerous to us. So we can apply this to anything. So let's say you wake up one morning and you have a cough. That's going to make you feel anxiety given the current context, which then may lead you to call your doctor, who then in turn says, gives you a COVID test, and then it comes back negative, and then you don't feel anxiety anymore. So here, in this kind of example, in this model, the anxiety led you to do something that then helps you reduce that anxiety and feel better. So this is coping skill number one. This is the thing that most people kind of do without really thinking about it. I didn't need to teach you this, but if you can fix the problem, if you can change the situation that's causing you the negative emotion, do so. That will help get rid of the negative emotion. Use the emotion to create action. Of course, that sometimes our emotions make us feel like doing things that actually can cause us more problems. This is just something to pay attention to. So a really common experience right now is that in quarantine, plenty of people are feeling much more alone and feeling a lot of loneliness and sadness. And most people, when they're feeling lonely or they're feeling sad, feel like isolating. And that in turn can cause us more problems because we isolate, which makes us feel more lonely, which makes us feel more sad and isolated, and so on and so forth. So it's something to pay attention to, that an emotion sometimes can make you act like run away from the bear in a way that's helpful, but other times it might just be like, you got to pay attention, you got to do something about this. So fix the problem if you can. In this case, like create a date night with a girlfriend and decide to put the recipe together, like in your separate kitchens, and FaceTime eat dinner together. Like do something that will help address this problem of being alone to fix the loneliness. What if you can't fix the problem though? That is the kicker, especially nowadays. There are a whole lot of things that we're all not really in control of. So there's a lot of political and social unrest. There's a pandemic, and a lot of people are experiencing things like a job loss or a job uncertainty, financial stress, that kind of thing. So these things are a little bit tricky, and I'm going to walk through them here to think about what might the next thing be if you can't fix the problem. So using the same model that we talked about before, the thing that happens here is maybe you just read about another thing that happened on the news, another protest, or something happened at a protest, in response to which you feel anger or maybe sadness or anxiety, guilt, shame, just exasperation in general. So while this emotion might prompt you to protest, right, or something like that, which in turn is like fixing the problem, but maybe not fully, right? You alone aren't going to change like this national problem. There seems to be something missing here, and it might not totally get rid of the negative emotion. Not only that, kind of this natural response of protesting, you might not be willing to do for physical or psychological reasons or something like that. You like don't want to go outside because you have another health problem and you don't want to be at risk. So in that case, if you can't fix the problem for whatever reason, the next thing that you want to try to consider is, can you do something to act in your values? Can you do something to help yourself feel better? So you're having a negative emotion in response to an event in the world, and you're having a negative emotion because somehow that event or that fact or that thing is causing you distress because it's in the way of your goals, or it's against your values, or there's something about it that you don't like. Can you then consider, okay, I can't fix this problem, but is there something I can do that's related that can help me feel better or work towards this value that this emotion is trying to tell me something's off here? So for example, here, it might be donating to an organization that you believe in, or finding and reading a book that's related to a topic. It's basically using the emotion, even if you can't fix the problem, to inform what you can do and help yourself feel better, or do something active rather than just sitting in the negative emotion, and do something relevant and do something meaningful. So in this next example of like pandemic as something you can't fix, I want to bring up something else that can happen and bring us back to the example I gave of like having a cough and having anxiety. In this case, what I want to point out is it's not actually the cough that's the problem. It's the fact that you're having the fear that I have coronavirus, right? So here, maybe you just wake up with a cough and then it's actually gone the hour later, but you're still kind of thinking about the anxiety or worried that you might be sick. Like outside of COVID times, if you will, you might be thinking, oh my God, I have allergies. Like maybe it'd be distressing, the cough, but it wouldn't be as anxiety provoking as it is right now, given this context. What can happen when we are worried or or scared or angry or something about something that's in our minds, rather than so much like a fact, like I have coronavirus, of course, is it can cause us to do things that keep the emotion around. So in this case, for example, you think, oh my God, I have coronavirus, and you start Googling like all coronavirus symptoms and coronavirus death rates and like news about coronavirus treatments. And you just kind of go down this rabbit hole of news articles that then just keep you in this cycle of worrying. So here, there's not exactly a problem to be fixed, especially if you've called your doctor and you've gotten a negative COVID test or something like that. You still might have some anxiety. So here, you just want to pay attention to, is the anxiety based on something I can fix? And when it's not, then you want to consider other coping strategies, which I'll give you in a second. But to bring it to that final example of like, if you lose your job, it makes total sense, and to feel anxiety, to feel sadness, to feel any number of negative emotions potentially. And then in response to that, you might start applying to lots of jobs. But you getting a job isn't entirely in your control, right? So you may be trying to fix the problem, and then in turn, you just keep getting these rejections, not because you're a bad candidate, well, maybe because you're a bad candidate, but just because the market's bad. And so you're trying to fix the emotion, but the world is getting in your way. So you keep having to feel the negative emotion because the fact is still there that you don't have a job and you're worried about your income. So in this case, you can do the same thing of like, okay, can I take valued actions? Like, can I take a class that's meaningful to me? Can I read books that help me professionally develop? Can I take this time to network or do some skills? Or just take this time to fulfill some other kind of important value to me? And that would be great. But then otherwise, beyond that, for all of these examples, another thing to consider is to just do something to survive and reduce the emotion. So when it comes to this option, there are two kind of sets of skills that I can recommend. The first, so the third coping skill, is just to distract. I think this one is pretty straightforward. Most people do this again naturally. We do this all of the time, whether it's purposeful or not. This is the watching Netflix. This is the making friendship bracelets, puzzling, finding new recipes and getting better at it, listening to music, like all of these things on the screen and more, right? The thing about emotions is that in order to feel something in response to like a trigger, in response to an event, a problem, you have to know the problem is there. And that can be really useful, because if you can direct your attention away from the problem behavior, or sorry, the problem, then all of a sudden that negative emotion goes down. Might be temporary, especially if you're not getting rid of the problem, but it's a way to help you tolerate and survive in the short term. So just like the doing of activities is distracting and effective in and of itself. Beyond that is, in addition to distraction, or kind of at any time of this on this chain, and I'll talk about that in a second, you can use the tip skills. So tip skills are like some of my favorite DBT skills, and I'm gonna take more time to walk through these specifically and possibly even practice with the group if y'all are down. Tip skills are a skill that, as I kind of mentioned before, are there to help you calm down. So these are particularly useful if you're feeling really overwhelmed or feeling really agitated. But they can be really useful just when you're upset, period, and want to take a moment for yourself. So the tip skills specifically are getting at body chemistry. So emotions are biologically based, as I've said multiple times. And specifically, usually when you're feeling stressed out about something, you have the sympathetic nervous system in your body react. So the stress system, the fight or flight response that people have heard about. That's the heart rate, all the kind of stuff I described when the bear comes on your hike. Like your heart rate, you're sweating, all the blood rushes to your limbs, just like you're feeling like, oh my God, like crawling out of your skin. That's your stress response going up. The tip skills are specifically designed to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which deactivates the stress response. So they each get this at specific ways. So TIP is an acronym. T has two P's actually, but the T is for tipping the temperature of your face with cold water. So I love this one. This is based on the idea of the mammalian dive reflex. So all mammals, not including humans, but not just humans, have evolved to have this reflex where when we go underwater, our heart rates slow down. You can Google this, it's really fun. People like do this and they show how it works. When we go underwater, our heart rates go down because it's a way to conserve oxygen because we can't breathe underwater. So it's something that our bodies just naturally do. So in order to like use this as a hack, we can specifically try to make our faces cold so that our bodies and our brains feel like we're underwater. Apparently it's like based on the head, right? Which makes sense if you can't breathe, even if just your face is underwater. So the way you can do this, I mean, you can go jump in a pool or a lake or something if you happen to have that, but otherwise you can stick your head in a bowl of ice water, but more likely you'll be more open to like going to the freezer, getting a bag of frozen peas and putting that over your face. And like I have done this with my Apple Watch, with a Fitbit, your heart rate goes down. It's kind of incredible. So the idea is put the cold over your face. You can even like lean down if you want, and then you hold your breath. Do this for as long as you can, like don't hurt yourself that you become overwhelmed by it, but do that for as long as you feel like you need to calm down. Use that mammalian dive reflex, trick your body into lowering that stress response so that the emotional experience itself, which is so tied to the biological experience, goes down. The next skill, I, stands for intense exercise. So this one's a little bit more straightforward, but the way I like to think about it is like when you have a computer problem or a problem with your phone, you call the IT guy and he's like, have you like tried pressing the power button type of thing? Like you just press and hold down to do a hard reset of the computer. This is the same kind of thing. So when we exercise, when you exercise, your heart rate goes up, your sympathetic nervous system goes up, the stress response goes up, you get agitated. When you come back down, you calm down. So this is kind of seeing that your body is agitated from an emotional experience, and then specifically diving into exercise to exert yourself, to agitate yourself on purpose, so that when you stop exercising, the emotion comes down with it. So this is like ideally like going on a run and like getting 20 minutes of like cardio, but it doesn't have to be that. You can see a pretty big difference just from getting down and doing like 20 push-ups. That's pretty hard for a lot of people, even 10. Or doing jumping jacks for a minute, doing a wall sit for a minute, like doing kind of like boxing for a minute just with your arms, whatever you can do based on like your body and any injuries you might have. Again, pretty straightforward, just an option. The thing about the T and the I, obviously, is you can't do them just like when you're out like grocery shopping and getting anxious about the person next to you not wearing a mask, or you can't do them like at work. Actually, you can kind of like splash cold water on your face, I suppose, but it doesn't work quite the same way. So that is why I love the first P, paced breathing. This is one that I probably use the most out of any distress tolerance skill, because wherever you go, you have your breath. Wherever you go, you're breathing. So take advantage of it and use a skill. Not only that, is it's the only one that like truly you can engage in without anyone around you knowing. If you do it fully, like take huge breaths, then maybe someone could see, but you can do this skill without anyone around you seeing it. So when I think about paced breathing, I think about three main things. The first is to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. The second is to take deep breaths into your belly rather than into your chest and shoulders. So when you see someone who's really stressed out and like hyperventilating, you kind of like see their chest move and like they're breathing deeply, but they're breathing kind of up and out. The way that our lungs work, we have a diaphragm that sits at the bottom of our ribs and it pulls down. And that is actually what pulls our air in. So in order to breathe most deeply, you want to think about pulling that diaphragm down and bringing air all the way down into your stomach rather than expanding your chest out. So breathing down into your belly, hence belly breathing. The third, and honestly the most important thing, so if you remember anything, paced breathing is about this, which is making your exhale longer than your inhale. That is because every single time you breathe in, your heart rate speeds up a little bit, and every single time you breathe out, it slows down a little bit. It's just from my understanding, one of those things that your body does in like this homeostasis type of way of reacting to the environment. So this is another hack of taking advantage of something that your body does specifically already and naturally, and trying to use it to help yourself calm down. So by exhaling very long, you make your body slow your heart rate down for a longer period of time than it would have otherwise. Hence, slowing your heart rate down and then making your brain interpret, oh, I'm feeling less negative emotion. So this can look like breathing in for 4 seconds and breathing out for 6. That's a really basic place to start. If we do practice, if people are interested, that's usually what I do, even just for a minute. So 6 breaths, 10 seconds each for 1 minute of 4 seconds in and 6 seconds out. You don't have to do it that way, but it also can be distracting to like watch a clock. But as long as you're breathing and make the exhale as long as it can be, you will get the benefit of this paced breathing. The final P, the final skill of TIP, stands for paired muscle relaxation, most commonly known as progressive muscle relaxation. So this is a thing that also, if you Google or like YouTube, you will find audio scripts for how to do this. But the basic idea is that you go through your body from your head to your toes, or toes to your head, depending on what your preference is, kind of working your way up by muscle group or working your way down by muscle group, tightening and loosening, tightening and relaxing your muscles. So it's specifically one muscle group at a time. So starting with your toes, going to the arches of your feet, going to your calves, your thighs, your butt, all the way up to your jaw, your tongue, your eyes, your forehead, your neck, your head, just all the tiny muscles, all the way up your body by first tensing, 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 and then letting go and breathing deeply into that relaxation. So this is kind of similar to the intense exercise of you specifically tense in order to then relax. Because when we're feeling stressed out, we get tense, right? I think everyone knows that. And usually you're gonna hold it in one area of your body, like a lot of times it's the shoulder, a lot of times it's your forehead, a lot of times it's your neck. For some people, it's like your stomach or your butt. Doing progressive muscle relaxation when you're upset acutely can help bring that tension down, which then in turn helps you calm down. But beyond that, if you practice PMR, progressive muscle relaxation, like on a daily basis, it also allows you to get better understanding and better insight into your body. So the more you do it, the more that in real time, you'll start feeling that tension. And it's quite common in my experience working with people that muscle tension, once you get used to seeing it and feeling it, is actually the first thing that you might notice before you get really stressed out. So not only does it get you better at being like aware of your physical sensations and therefore aware of your emotions, it then also makes it easier for you to relax. If you've been in this practice of tensing and relaxing, that when you notice the tension in real time, it's often easier to let it go after you practice this. So both of the P's in particular, I would not only recommend in times when you're acutely stressed, but as potential like daily practices, kind of like a mindfulness practice that over time can really, really make a huge difference about helping you when you're super stressed, calm down, but also just kind of giving you a level of equanimity and calm in general, of getting better at noticing your body, noticing your thoughts, noticing your emotions, and feeling more in control of them. So that's TIP, and I love it. So as a wrap up, I just want to point out kind of what I covered and maybe a way to break it down for yourself. It's like when you're feeling an intense negative emotion, you can ask yourself, can I fix the problem? Can I actually change the thing that's causing an emotion in the first place? And if you can, fix it. Use the emotion for why it's there. Get creative, problem solve, ask for help, whether from a therapist or a friend or a spouse or roommate, something like that. If you can't fix the problem, can you then use the emotion to kind of motivate you to do something else within your values that can help you feel better, at least temporarily? If so, use it. Do something that works towards a goal or a value that feels related to the negative emotion, that even if you can't fix the problem, at least you can feel some meaning or mastery or pride related to this negative experience. If neither of those things are possible, that's where distraction comes in. So do something to distract and tolerate the situation until you can change it. Tips you can do at any of these points. Essentially, sometimes we feel super overwhelmed, such we can't even answer these questions. We don't even see like, oh, actually, this is something I can fix, or it's not something I can fix. You might need to practice something like TIP first to help you come down to see more clearly. Because when any of us are feeling anything like a 10 out of 10, no one can see straight. So TIP can be useful at the start, it can be useful all throughout, and it can be useful just in and of itself, a skill to help you to survive a moment or to get through a difficult moment that you have to get through and you can't change. Again, like being in the grocery store or reading the news or just something like that, especially paced breathing, as I said. So that's actually it. Thank you for listening. I am going to unshare my screen now, open everybody up. If you feel comfortable coming back on video, please do. I'd love just to talk through this stuff and answer any questions you might have. I know I did throw a lot at you.
Feel free to type questions in the chat as well.
You're welcome, Liza.
I have a question.
Yeah, of course.
So I was wondering if you could talk more about like your education and like what degrees you got and how long it took for you to get all them.
Totally. So after graduating from college, I went to a 2-year research assistant position. After that, I went to a PhD program, which took me 6 years to graduate from. A PhD program normally will take 5 to 7 years for clinical psychology at least. And I graduated with that last year. The research position I did, because mostly for PhDs, you definitely need research experience to get into grad school. I would be absolutely more than willing to talk to you about that one-on-one and answer lots of questions about that, because applying and figuring that kind of stuff out is so stressful. I had so many urges to swear right there. Like it's very difficult. So yeah, I'd be more than willing to talk one-on-one if that's an interest of yours.
Kiki, I have a question. Am I still here? No, okay. I am currently a nanny and a tutor, and I work with children. And so I know a lot of parents have been asking me, and I've been even wondering kind of the best way to help children deal with this. And I know that's all their ball game, but do you have any, a lot of the advice you gave here, I feel like could translate over to children. But do you have maybe suggestions on major things we should be doing differently when talking to kids, probably like, elementary age or even a little younger, on how to kind of deal with not going to school or seeing your friends or just the general time?
So my training has been entirely in adults, and I do not have children, and I don't spend a lot of time around children. And what stands out to me, and that I feel very confident saying, based on my understanding of how DBT has been applied to adolescents and middle schoolers at least, and my understanding of from just friends who do child therapy, I would imagine the place to start is to validate primarily. So really giving the space to allow them to express what they're feeling, and then helping them identify the specific emotion words, like sadness versus anxiety versus guilt versus whatever. Even just the process of naming emotions can be incredibly therapeutic for adults, but especially kids. Given the space to just try to start to understand and recognize that this is a hard time, and then given the skills to understand why it's a hard time by identifying what you're feeling and then why, I think that would be the place to start at least. And then coping skills, I don't know. I can try to Google that or ask my friend and get back to you, Lindsay.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, Kiki. I actually have a question as well. Tess and I are, just so you know, we're currently the GUTS representatives.
Hey. Okay, cool.
With Naomi Uday. So she's couldn't make it, but we're the GUTS representatives for our forum. I just had a question about how, you've had so much schooling and so much experience and all of this stuff, and how do you think that Hill not only set you up for college, but for all of your further academic experience and life experience as well? I guess basically just what I'm asking is, what were some of the greatest things that you learned from Hill, or how that helped you at all?
100%. Okay. So what I can say is I was very academically challenged at Hill, and that prepared me for college very well. In some ways, some of the classes I took, at least in my freshman year at Yale, were easier than Doc Bender's humanities class, and like truly. So I think the things that really made a difference for my college education in terms of feeling prepared for it by Hill was probably twofold. The first was being given the basic language and understanding of like scientific method. So how can you like make a hypothesis and then test it, but then also how to write. I would say that, like how to put your thoughts onto the page in a way that was grammatically correct, sure, but actually was like most well understood by the reader. Like, were you writing for the reader's understanding or yours? And then by writing for the reader, you ended up understanding it better yourself. So I would say that would probably be the primary like skill and like way of thinking that Hill prepared me for college. Did that answer all your questions as part of that? Okay. I saw you nodding, Allie. Like, yeah, writing in DB's class.
Yeah, humanities was otherworldly.
Yeah.
Much harder than college. I think all of my college put together.
Yeah, can get that. Sure. Sorry, someone in the chat just asked, could I share my slides? Would love to have tip up on my screen. Yes, a fridge. Yes, I can share my slides. I can also send, Allie, would you be able to like send an email to everybody? Okay, I also have a handout from DBC that I could share with everybody that has like the actual descriptions of how to do the skills as well. Yeah, great.
Yeah, I can send an email, and then the recording of this is going to go on YouTube as well. So if I'll probably put it on there tonight or early tomorrow, so you can always go and screenshot it as well.
Cool.
If you want the instant gratification. Are there any other questions for Kiki? Yeah, I think we're good.
Awesome. Thanks for coming and spending your Wednesday night with me.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Just for upcoming stuff with Alumnae Society, we have our August book club on the 26th, where we'll discuss Michelle Obama's Becoming. We have the GRIP mentoring program that will be starting this fall. So if anyone is interested in becoming a mentor, you can reach out to me or fill out the survey that's in our Instagram bio link and in the last newsletter for the Alumnae Society. We'll probably be reviewing those applications on Friday or after Friday. So get those in by Friday if you're interested in that. And if you're interested in giving a chapel talk, reach out to Lindsay Mays, and she can put you on our calendar for one of the upcoming months. So with that, thank you so much, Kiki, and everyone for coming. And hopefully we'll see you all at another alumni event soon.
Yeah, see you next Wednesday.
Yeah, have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.